No, I mean, are they necessary for the video or like? Yeah, so you can get the audio.
That's what I was clarifying. Thanks.
Do you mind if I wear this?
Yeah, go for it.
Because I'm gonna be doing that.
Yeah.
Is it? Do you want to actually drive the computer when we get to the section that we were going to talk about for a while?
Yeah, I can do that.
I don't care either way. Like, if you want me to, it's up to you.
Let's I can just take over. I just have to arrow through it, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna grab a chair.
Oh, there's no more. I might not need a chair.
I'll grab one just in case.
Is video pulse? Do you need us to like check the? Oh, okay. And you don't need to check the audio or anything like that? Say something for me. Huh?
Just talk. Say like. Mary had a little.
Oh, say. What? A B C D E F G testing 1 2 3. Probando. 1 2 3. Probando.
I just say own it. I mean, you've done a lot of work on this.
Say again?
I would just own it, yeah. I'll
Okay.
jump in where I can and.
Cool. UK with like introducing yourself when we get here.
Sure. Yes, I can do that. We got that covered.
Sweet.
Is this on? No. This thing? Yeah.
Are we ready to go? Can we just go at will? Yeah. How about as far as everybody else is concerned? Well, the microphone's. Do I got to switch this on? No. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? Should I shout? Yeah. Shout. All right. To the tune of. Happy birthday in English or happy birthday in Spanish? All right. Well, how's the con going so far? We just showed up like 20 minutes ago, so like ran in the door. Is that like clicks and pop? So we're going to talk about civic hacking, and for anybody, I don't know if like what you thought about in coming in here. We're not going to talk about this kind of civic. This isn't about turbocharging or anything like that. We're going to talk about rewiring society and the kind of civic that usually precedes engagement, or we're going to talk a little bit about politics. We're going to talk a little bit about government, or about the shape of things. It's going to be fairly high level. We're going to talk about tech a little bit, but mostly what we want to do is to get you guys excited about what we're excited about, which is using tech and using the hacker ethic for public good. So I'm Jeff Schuler. I'm a web developer here in Cleveland. I do most of my, I'm freelance. I do most of my work for organizations that are working towards ends that I care about. So I do a lot of stuff in environmental sustainability, education, empowerment, that kind of thing. And so for me, there was a certain amount of crossover here. I don't really care much about politics, and I don't tend to pay much attention to politics. I care a lot about the world around me, but I don't have a whole lot of investment or interest in sort of the machinations of society. Anybody else like feel that way at all? They pay attention to their sort of subset, subculture, subgenre, Say again? Okay, go for it, man. You can rule your world of one. Yeah, and
I think I'm supposed to use this just so that the video can capture it. My name is Beth Sebian. I live in Cleveland. I work out in Aurora. I am very interested in politics and public policy, and last summer organized a conference in Cleveland working with the county government to encourage them to be more open in how they conducted business. My perspective is that this is our government and that the decisions that they make are ones that everyone should have access to, and that for us to have a healthy society, citizens need to be engaged throughout the decision-making process that the people we elect undertake. That's how, it was through that project that Jeff and I connected. I don't have much of a tech background, but the more that I dug into this topic of open government, I connected with a lot of projects that Jeff will talk more about. And what I came to understand is that their open data is I think the way that we can push governments to think about being more open generally, and that we can create some pretty cool projects that help citizens also think differently about their role in government, and from both of those ends, changing the way citizens think and changing the way governments think, we can actually be well on our way to creating the type of society that we all deserve.
So we're kind of coming at it from different angles. I'm more interested in tech. He's more interested in the political process. So where we come together is vision. So we want to talk about, like, 20 years out from now, what do you guys foresee for our society? Give me some ideas of like what you'd like to see in 20 years. Anything. What would you like to see? Vision, like, ideally. Mad Max. Not foresee. Maybe you would like to see Mad Max. I mean, where are we going? What do we ideally want our society to look like? Fewer laws.
Why fewer laws?
So Beth threw me this question the other day, and I was kind of stumped for a little bit. I had to think about it. But simple things were coming to my mind: clean air, clean water, healthy people, no homelessness, no hunger, safe neighborhoods, connected communities, a fat day pipe. What it came down to was basic needs met and a fair shot for all. These were kind of like the underlying things that we were looking for. So how do we turn that into reality? Well, we have the tools. We have a lot of what it takes to make this vision a reality. We just don't all have it, and we don't all have it in the right places. And it's, the future's already here. It's just not very evenly distributed. The deck is stacked. Money owns government. Money owns a lot of our representatives. Money owns the media. The system is so complex. There's so many laws that we don't know how to navigate the system. We don't know how to engage ourselves. But I think the deck is stacked in our favor because we have ingenuity. We have incredible tools at our disposal, and to work on this. So how are we revisiting things? And what do we need? We kind of broke things down into three parts. So money owns government. We need to hold our representatives accountable for the decisions that they make and for the way that they shape our society. Transparency, we need an open process. We need to see what's going on. And accessibility, we need to change this idea that things are too complicated for people to get a hold of. So part of, people talk about e-government, e-democracy, and they're kind of taking things in different ways. One of the things that we think is key is this using technology to reconnect people and reconnect them to participatory process or to participatory self-determination for where we should be as a society. So as we kind of said, we're not just saying like, we want no more laws or we want an anti-government or whatever. We're kind of working on less laws. We're kind of working on both ends of this here. We're working with and for and in the system, and we're also doing things on our own. And that's kind of how we're approaching civic hacking and how we're going to talk about some of the ways that you can get involved with this and in it.
One point I want to make there, there's, in my impression, people, when they think about government, think about, a bunch of people in Washington or what they see on the news. But there's another layer of it that is like making sure when you pull out of your driveway, your bumper doesn't like hit the pavement because there's a big pothole like right in front of your house. Or making sure that your kids or your neighbors' kids get like a good education. What else? I mean, right. Having like reliable utilities, making sure when you like fly across the country that you can trust that like your pilot isn't drunk. Like those are, government is very active in ways that we don't often think of that we really benefit from. And part of this work is about reminding people in the public that our government is active and that there are ways that they can contribute and be more involved.
How long do these last, presentations?
About an hour.
An hour? Thank you. So we're talking about the hacker ethics applied to civic engagement, right? This is an awesome quote. Luigi Montanez gave a good talk at RubyCon or a camp of some sort about civic hacking. And I think, what he gets at here, a civic hacker will do something not asking for permission. This is kind of part of what we see as the key of the ethics behind this, that, we as people who are interested in taking things apart, seeing how they work, rebuilding them, can apply that same philosophy to the system that governs a lot of our day-to-day existence. So a civic-minded bent, I thought, was an interesting. In that same guy's presentation, he said, "Do we really need another test-driven development Ruby framework? We have, so many of them. These tools are great. We like to build new tools because they help us do work better. They help us be more efficient." I was thinking about what are some other examples of do we really need another? Do we really need another Arduino-powered laser harp? Yes. Do we really need an augmented reality mobile app that puts a mustache on the face of the person you're pointing the camera at? It's fun. It's cool. I like this stuff too. And this was actually by somebody you guys, a lot of you probably know, here in Cleveland. But engineers using their brilliance to solve sort of inane problems sometimes gets at me a little bit. I think it's kind of like a collective loss in some ways that we have we have the ability to really change, the shape of things, and we're putting mustaches on people's faces. So, and Mitchell Baker she's the head of the Mozilla Foundation. She was talking about just open source, people volunteering their time to build the world they want to see. So that's what we're getting at here, is building the world that we'd like to see. So if you have a laptop out in front of you, this is an HTML presentation based on a JavaScript framework, so you can follow along, or you can kind of like go off on your own with the links of some of the examples that we're going to show next. So bit.ly/Civic Hacking Nauticon, or if you want to get right to the next slide, it's this one, and you can use arrow keys and so we're going to talk about some examples and principles, examples nationwide of what we're talking about, and some of the principles behind them. So the Open States project, I think, is a pretty awesome example because it sort of covers a whole lot of the bases of what we're talking about, okay? Accountability, transparency, and accessibility. What it does is it gives us a window into state legislative data. So our state legislators, the bills that have been voted on, passed, not passed, whatever, district boundaries, and committee meetings. So this is what the Ohio's state legislator's website looks like. Let's go to it. Or let's not. So are folks pretty familiar with the concept of open data? Who knows what open data is? Okay, cool. We'll talk about this in a minute. Wow. Right. Hooray for open source JavaScript frameworks. So while we wait, so the data's all there, right? They're publishing, the state legislators publishing the data on what happens. Let's see here. Bear with me. We can look at all these bills. We can look at who voted on what. We can look at information about our representatives. But if we really want to take the data out of it, it's tough. It's all in HTML. It's not consistently marked up. It's not easy for a machine to parse. It's arguably fairly simple for a human to get at. So what the Open States project does is turn that into this. And this is JSON, JavaScript object notation. It provides an API to be able to get at all that legislative data. So I can write an app to pull down, I want to know which, information about this bill, who voted on this particular section, yay or nay for this bill, or whatever, all this kind of stuff. I can, write a mobile app to get at the data. I can download all the data and make an infographic out of it. I can do whatever I want with it. What's neat about the Open States project, one of the neat things about the Open States project, so they've done this for every state in the country, and it's kind of a distributed model. So all the green states here are ready, they say, and the blue ones are experimental. Up until like a few months ago, we had some red states in there which weren't done at all yet. But what this means people have been building scrapers for each state, because that was what we were just looking at is the Ohio legislator's website. Each state's website is different. They're all done differently. They all look differently. They're all difficult to pull apart. So motivated individuals in each of these states have gone and said, I want to, I wrote a scraper to parse, to scrape and parse the Ohio legislature's website and deliver the data back to the Open States Project. And then that scraper became part of the project. The project is on GitHub. So you can clone it, you can fork it, you can do your own thing with it. You can, they're looking for people to help with these experimental states, and I don't know where it goes from here, but it's a pretty awesome model because it's not only the Summit organization, the Summit Foundation, sort of running this thing to try to get all this data together, but it's the civic hacking thing too. It's motivated individuals who want to refine this data and make it available to everybody to do things with. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Were you talking to James Kirk? Cool. No, I was talking to Steve Coleman. Oh, right. Yeah. Thanks. Sunlight's a pretty awesome organization. They've got a lot of really neat projects going on. This is just one of them. I think we might show one or two others. Sunlight was partner. Can you talk about like how they're involved in that project?
Sure. We pulled them in. They were one of our first partners, and they provided a grant for us, which paid for most of the venue expenses and other costs associated with the event. But really, like where they stood out was just like as someone who didn't have much of a technical background, they were able to explain to me like what I needed, who I should connect with, who was doing other kind of work in this area, and so they're like an incredible resource. They're committed to a revolution in this country, and I think they're going at it in a pretty effective way so far by doing this national work and then bringing it down to the state level and the local level.
So open data is central to the Open States Project and central to a lot of what we're talking about here. So this is a pretty succinct description of what open data is. Sunlight actually published 10 principles for open data that are good kind of guidelines. So the idea we're getting at here is that a government or whoever should be, when they're publishing data, it shouldn't be made just available in human readable format. It should be made in machine readable format so other people can do stuff with it. So some of these guidelines for how governments should be opening up and publishing their data, completeness. So we want to see all the data. Primacy. This should be the original and fundamental data that came out of wherever we measured it from. Timeliness, that it should stay up to date. Ease of physical and electronic access. So it should be easy for folks to get at it. Machine readability, obviously. Non-discrimination. So non-discrimination of who has access to it. Commonly owned standards. So we're talking about not using proprietary formats. So a lot of what our conversation with the Cuyahoga County government, we talked about like what formats should we use, what are good formats, what are open data formats, and the baseline is non-proprietary. So you're not publishing stuff in Excel, obviously, and not machine readability. PDFs aren't good, but we're talking about XML, we're talking about CSV, talking about JSON. raw data and bulk data is kind of the ideal. APIs are awesome. API is an application programmer interface, so APIs are great. Like the OpenSafe project offers an API where I can query for certain bills, legislators, whatever. But they also offer the data in bulk downloadable format, so I can go and just get all of it and then do what I want with it. And that's kind of APIs are a little sexier. Like I can write an app to get just the data that I'm looking to get at the time when I need it. Bulk data is a little more fundamental in terms of like the baseline for what we're looking for. We want this to be usable by everyone, and then people can do stuff with it. So most of this is around machine readability and just anybody can get access to it and do what they want with it. So kind of on a similar line as open space, we're not just talking about, just to make the fact, we're not just talking about government. Because we know who runs government in a lot of cases. So this site aims to assemble information on, they want to get information on every company in the world. And right now, a lot of what you can find is just sort of the legal documents that define the organization's, like their articles of incorporation and so forth. I've only played with it a little bit. There's some good info in there, and they have interesting way of like licensing the data that you can use. Another, a little, so this is an example that wasn't done by an organization. This is a guy, his name is Max Ogden. That's Max Ogden. He's pretty incredible. He's got a lot of different projects. You can check out his site. This is one of many projects. Basically it's 99 ATMs. It's a mapping application, web application, as well as a mobile app where you can find ATMs in Portland that don't charge a fee. Like community banks, credit unions, so forth. Something that somebody did that makes a whole lot of folks' lives a little bit better and helps people save money and helps people kind of helps that 99% hold on to a few percent. I'm not going to show that right now. You can check it out yourself. So there's a few different sites that we've been exploring that are like open data affiliates, and they're data catalogs. So I'm a developer. I want to write a mobile app that does something interesting, but I don't really know exactly what that is. I know I want it to be kind of applicable to a lot of people. Maybe they've got different categories here, but basically this lets people catalog and then find and use data that's available and sort of rates the data, not necessarily based on those 10 principles, but tells you what format it's in, gives some indication of the completeness of the data. So this is a place, and this is something that we're looking for here, we're looking to build here, because this helps drive this whole system. Like, open data is great, and the data itself is interesting and extremely important for us to have as a society, but it's really what gets done on top of that that makes it useful. So this is a catalog of data that has to do with anything and everything in Philadelphia, and it's not only data, but there's I think they divide things into apps, APIs, and data. So it's also a catalog of apps that use the data in the catalog. So that's a pretty neat project. There's another one called Civic in Portland that does similar stuff. it's built in Drupal, and that's kind of where I spend the majority of my time. I've gotten them just recently to okay open sourcing Civic apps to Portland, and I want to fork it and repurpose it and build it here. So part of what we're getting at here is that we want your help and your participation, and there's a few other places that we can use help. But I think this is kind of a super important building block to creating an ecosystem of open data and of apps that leverage open data, and ultimately apps that help us take control of the world around us and of our government, of our day-to-day.
One thing I find interesting about Open Data Philly, if you can go back to it, is I do want to point out like how something like this can change our communities. So you have in a place like Cleveland, for example, one thing that we've really struggled with is foreclosures. So part of a effective response at the city level, for example, would be understanding where foreclosures are happening, what communities are impacted more heavily by them, and to paint that picture requires a lot of research and time and money that governments often don't have in order to craft a comprehensive response. Part of what things like Open Data Philly do is they're basically crowdsourcing a lot of information that then governments or profit organizations can use, that takes away the step of actually having to pay money for a lot of this data, and can allow people to then just focus their resources on the solution instead of investing a lot of money in understanding what the problem is in the first place. So like one good example of this is that we know that water shutoffs are like a key indicator of poverty, and we know that for example, a community organization could use data from the water, is it the Water Commission, to understand where communities are that are most affected by water shutoffs, and that's data that exists, and it's data that you can easily then comb when this type of resource is set up to target your resources. And water shutoff information is just one of like thousands of indicators that we already know about, that are floating around in data sets that already exist, that people have already gathered. And that's why this project Open Data Philly is so powerful, is when you can put all those data sets together, it really allows you to make some pretty powerful connections to understand what is actually happening in communities and where you should spend your resources to fix them.
Capital Wars was a neat little project. This is also a Sunlight one, where it's scraping the congressional record and capturing everything that representatives have said, and you can search it. You can look for particular words and see, by party who has used this word more in their floor speeches. Pretty neat to play with. There's no API there, but it's interesting data to look at, and it's it comes to this transparency and accountability thing that we have a way to pay attention to what's being said and how it's being said, and that's sort of a window in. Open 311, there's a few different projects that are doing this, but this is an open source framework. I think the federal government initially built this to make it useful for municipal governments. A lot of you probably know 411 and 911. Well, 311 is you need city information. Like there's a pothole, or there's whatever, my water's off, or how do I get public records on such and such. 311 is a number you can dial in a lot of places. to get that sort of information. Open 311 is since that's such an expensive thing for a city to take on and a difficult task. This is a framework that lets them do this civic issue tracking and can connect to phone and mobile and texting and so forth.
One point I want to make there, not Open 311, but there are other projects out there that actually have developed partnerships with their government where citizen input feeds directly into workflow queues, like in government. So like a public works commission, like a public works department would be completely integrated with this depository for citizen feedback. And without even screening, citizens would be able to trigger action by the public works department.
Civic is an example of this. And this is a for-profit company that's providing, like, for different cities or for wherever, you can add issues. You know, my light is hanging by its hinge, or it's a street light is hanging by its hinge. And they give, the way they make their money is they sell a tool for governments to be able to manage all these issues and respond to them. So another way that a lot of this stuff is happening is inspiring, organizations that want to see novel uses of their data, inspiring civic hackers to use that. So there's a lot of cities are doing this. The federal government is doing this in a lot of ways. This challenge.gov has all sorts of basically hacking challenges where they give us some data and they say, we want to see the most novel uses of this. And you can build a mobile app, a web app, or whatever, an infographic with this data. You can mash it up, and that's kind of one of the keys to having that raw data is, we can merge, mash data sets together and come up with new things from those relationships. And there's big money involved here if you want to go for it. We want to talk a little bit about like what's been happening here locally.
Sure. So the few examples that we cited, those are things that are happening at the national level or in other communities across the country. My goal with organizing this event last year was that Cleveland is a city that's in pretty desperate need of action, and that there's a moment in history now that we have to become more active and actually have an impact. So part of what I saw, as I think most of you are aware, is there was like a pretty big corruption scandal in Cuyahoga County. A lot of our judges now and elected officials are in jail. It's probably an understatement. But we had a unique opportunity in that last year you had an entirely new government that had been brought into office under each of whom made a promise that they were going to turn our government around. And it's very rare that you have these like public commitments of people bending over backwards saying that they're going to do, that they want an open government. For me, that was a trigger that we had to hold them to their word. That's kind of a negative way to frame it. On the positive side, you had people who were really kind of actively committed to providing a better government. And what I realized is they didn't know what that meant. And that I saw it as part of my job to say, this is what openness looks like. This is how you need to talk to citizens in your community. This is how you need to make information available. And I went into it with the assumption that, half of our political problems aren't outright malice; they're just like ignorance, and not in any malicious sense, just people not knowing what they need to do in order to make their government more accessible in terms of elected officials. So, I ended up, because of the corruption that we'd experienced on the county level, I ended up choosing to build this project out dealing with the government in Cuyahoga County. And I worked with the county executive and then people on the county council. And I was really surprised at how eager people were to actually engage with me on this issue. They knew it was a problem. They knew it was something that they were going to be held accountable to, and they were the first to admit that they didn't always know what that meant or what that looked like. The way that this conference unfolded, it was a 2-day event. We had 12 sessions spread across those 2 days. A few of them, just to give you an example, one was improving trust in government, serving, digital divide, how to involve non-wired residents, and make sure that if we were really making a push to get stuff online, that people would have access to that. So, that was making sure that library access was improved. Campaign finance, making sure that information was available. And then we ended up breaking into a few pilot projects at the end of the event, where we looked at how to make the budget process more open and accessible. Procurement is the process of the process that the county goes through when they're awarding contracts. And that was the crux of our corruption problem in the previous administration, is that they just give contracts to people that paid them off or that put pools in their backyard. And so we wanted to make sure that process was open and accessible. Another one is County Stat, which was an internal kind of system of metrics that the county was using to evaluate the efficacy of the departments within the county. It struck me as a pretty good thing that the public would want to see. This is if we really do uphold this idea that this is our government and we should have access to this information. We want to know how our departments are performing. We want to know how effectively they're using their money. And if we can, what I saw as part of the mission of this event was to get everybody, citizens and people that were actually elected officials or that were working in government, to understand that this is not information that they get to sweep under the rug. This is that type of information. How effective our government is working is the core of what the public needs access to, and that gets back to this idea of accountability. I'd also say, just kind of stepping back, when it comes to the idea of accountability, part of what I think this work is about is taking accountability from gotcha politics, where we try to catch politicians red-handed being corrupt, to a relationship that citizens and elected officials have that is more cooperative. So those were some of the sessions that we covered. In every session, I made a point to have a representative from the administration in the room, a representative from the county council, people with a more policy bent from the activist community, which is probably how I describe myself, and then someone with more of a tech background. And the idea was that we would workshop these topics together and develop some frameworks for understanding how we could improve this in Cuyahoga County. Relationships, as I mentioned earlier, Stonewall Sunlight Foundation was an incredible partner. They provided funding. They provided a lot of technical assistance to me as I was building the project out. There were a couple nonprofit organizations or political organizations at the state level that helped connect me with different partners. For example, there's a couple statewide media organizations that were really supportive of making sure that the government was going to be more open up in Cuyahoga County. So we had this event. There were a couple kind of takeaways that that I had. The first was that timing, as I mentioned, was everything. It made a huge difference that we were able to jump on this group of newly elected officials who knew come election time that their feet were going to be held to the fire, and that people were going to be expecting them to demonstrate how they had actually made this government better. And out of their own political interest, like for better or worse, it was something that they were invested in working on. And you don't always have that. Like a lot of I think other government partners we considered working with were good people, but we would have been fighting like an entrenched momentum, and it was a unique opportunity that you had a fresh group there that wanted to shake things up. The second takeaway was that it helped to find allies inside. There were two benefits to that. The first was that it helped to have people that were actually advocating for your project and for people to work with you. And we had a couple of those, and their value was immeasurable. And then the second is that it helps to have people who tell you like what's up, and who will say, this is just, you're asking for something that's just not going to happen right now, because of whatever other constraints. So having people that can help you navigate the landscape, also very helpful. And then 3, those partnerships that we had at the national, state and local level were invaluable. If anything, just this work is very important as far as I'm concerned, but it is like a long game, and you need people who share that passion and that commitment, and are willing to help you learn through it, so that you can kind of perfect your effectiveness. In terms of lessons learned, first one, it's not the people, it's the system that gets in the way. I actually found this to be a very kind of fortifying experience in that it gave me more confidence in the people that work in our government, and I was very moved by the level of commitment of people that work for the county of Cuyahoga, to do right by the people that live here. At the same time, what I saw is that they did not always have the resources to experiment with types of things like open data, that they were often doing the job of 3 people, reporting to 3 different bosses. And it was, as far as I'm concerned, that's a reality of government at this point. I think it's something we can talk about wanting to move away from, where we have governments that are more kind of effective and well organized. But what we're dealing with right now is that a lot of these are pretty slow to change institutions. And the way they're going to change is by working with those people that mean well and are smart and are hardworking within them. The second is to understand other people's interests and look for win-win. So, as I've mentioned, we were talking about like this moment in history in Cuyahoga County. One way to look at it is that like you have a bunch of people that know they won't get reelected unless they do something. I found it much more constructive to think about this as, these are people who genuinely want to do the right thing, and they don't know how. They don't always know how, and that my role is to connect them with the resources and the information they need to do what the residents of this community deserve. So an example of that is, I think the hacker that did the 99 ATMs works for an organization, or was a fellow in an organization called Code for America, and they have a fellowship program where they dispatch people to small communities across the country to like prompt them to be more innovative with some of this work. I see it as our role to say, hey, City of Cleveland, this is something you should consider. because it's not going to occur to them unless someone's standing there in front of them saying this is something you should do. And it's like, this has been so humbling to me, in that if you just like stand up and get in someone's face for a while and respectfully say, you should consider this, I think everyone would win if we do this. That people are open. They're not like trying, people aren't trying to be difficult. It's just a lot of constraints that they're under, and they need help finding solutions. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for win-wins with this work. And then the third is be relentless. Like I said, a lot of these people are doing like the job of 3 people, and they are under a lot of pressure to kind of respond to a lot of fires. And I think throughout this work, we found that you need to be mindful of the long game, just like continue to bring this in front of them, and then push for the type of responses you need to move the work forward. And as much as I was able to depersonalize this and just make it about getting the project done, that only served the interest of this kind of moving forward effectively. Okay. Do you want to take over?
I did want to say, so for running the TAP Summit last year, Beth was named by Sunlight Foundation the Open Government Champion for the state of Ohio. So it was a pretty awesome thing that happened. She convened a lot of different folks from Cuyahoga County government and this community, and I had an awesome experience there. It was a pretty transformative event, so she deserves a lot of props for that. We're running short on time, so
Go for it.
where we want to get to is tell you a little bit about what kind of things we're working on now and invite your participation. So on the summit, I led an open data breakout at the summit. We talked about open data. People were excited about it. People said, oh, we ought to get this organization involved, this organization, this. And it was like, okay, this is great. Like, people are motivated, but trying to gather all these big entrenched organizations into like bring them into the fray, I felt it was going to slow things down. So I started a Civic Hacking Meetup that's on meetup.com. And through that, we organized some folks in a continuing relationship with the county to build basically a customer service mobile app or mobile optimized website for the county. They haven't launched it yet, but this was kind of like a bunch of people getting together, building something with and for the county. So it was a really interesting kind of process of working with them and with a lot of the red tape and bureaucracy that goes on there, but trying to be kind of like a team of volunteers putting something together. Another thing that we're excited about is doing this open data catalog and thinking about, should we work with NeoCanDo, or how can we work with NeoCanDo, which has a lot of local public data, and now we have this Civic Apps possibility. So it'd be great to have folks help us to build that. A few resources if you want to get into either scraping to get find your own data, to get at data and repurpose it, or just how to think about open data. Google Refine's a good tool for like cleaning up and resolving inconsistencies in your base data. The Civic Commons is not the Civic Commons that's around here, which is thecivicommons.org, but they have some great resources on open government, open data. There's some local data here if you want to start looking at stuff to use yourself. And then here are some of the projects that we're continuing with. So TAP is still happening, and we're still, we have an ongoing relationship with the county that we need help from folks to push the county to do things like make an open data legislation, or start to open up their data themselves. Continuing to work on this mobile survey, and then the Civic Hacking Meetup is really like join data, NoSQL or geospatial data or scraping or whatever. It's there for this, and I'm thinking of it as sort of a launch pad for projects and a launch pad in a community. That's about it. We rushed through the last few there, but that's about it. I think we got questions in another room. I don't have any closing thoughts. Anybody else have closing thoughts? The Federal Reserve Bank or the federal government?
Well, like some communities have governments that don't want to do it. Ours, everybody knows that my own community has different layers and complete facilities.
I think that's a great question, and I think it's one we've probably all it's a problem that we've all dealt with at some point. There's a couple things. The first might seem trite, but it's not. It's like, run against that guy. Find someone to run against him. The second is just, I think, back to this relentless point. There is, I think, great value in just like being a mosquito for people. And what you can do is shift their interest so that it is easier for them to just like give into what you want than fight you on it. And then the second is like, think about partnerships. Like what other people in your community share your end goal. And it could be for totally different reasons than you're invested in, but work with them, and then just push, like relentlessly, just push for it. And that's how these things change. I think that's a great point, and it's one we could probably kind of end on. Part of what I hear there is that right now we're living where this information and our interaction with politicians has been pipelined into a very narrow set of interactions that the media dictate and that politicians and money dictate. And I think what this work about more broadly is saying, let's democratize that conversation and let's spread it out across a broader group of people. And that's what open data is about, and that's what really opening this whole world of
So So we'd love to talk to you all more about this. The slides again are here if you want to dig at them. There's please, if you're interested in this at all, join this meetup group, the Civic Hacking Meetup, and I think we're going to be in the question room. But thanks a lot, everybody.